What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. If you say so. Greetings and salutations all, I.S. Anderson here once again with another video of the Song of Ice and Fire series. And yes, I have read all the Greyjoy chapters in Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons. So yes, a lot of you are saying that I should read those chapters and give my take on them. So I have now read the Greyjoy chapters and will now discuss them with you here today. So as always, this is a book discussion. If you haven't read up to Dance with Dragons, or at least watched all the show that you want to see, and you don't want to be spoiled, then this video isn't for you. For the rest of us, let's discuss the Greyjoys. So our story starts when Balon Greyjoy, the current king of the Iron Islands, mysteriously gets struck by lightning and falls off a bridge and into the water and dies. So they blame that the Storm God, the Drowned God's arch rival, its other, has killed him. And so now, since he has no sons, his first two sons are dead, and Theon is now Reek, and he's a weakling anyway, and probably dead anyway, so they need a new king. So according to Asha Greyjoy, Balon wanted her to take the Sea Stone chair, the Iron Islands, equivalent to the Iron Throne, after he was dead. But of course, the rest of the Greyjoys, they don't think the Iron Islanders are going to be so keen on the thought of a woman being the queen and ruling. So they decide to have a King's Moot. And Asha decides to call it the Queen's Moot because she's just so certain that she's going to be able to be queen. So they have the King's Moot / Queen's Moot. And a couple, guys come forward saying, I should be king, and I can't remember their names, and I don't remember their promises, and they're pretty irrelevant anyway, so I don't remember them. But anyway, Asha then, she gets up, and she says, well, I will make a good queen because I will bring peace, I'll have an alliance with the other kingdoms, and, they'll give us some lands, and, we'll be prosperous that way. So then her uncle Victarion Greyjoy, he gets up and says, well, I'm going to do everything the way Balon did it. We're just going to go around loot and plunder and, do what we do best and, just carry on life as normal. I'll be the king and, we won't change it all. We'll just keep the old ways and everybody will be happy. And they're just like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Good idea. Yeah. So Victarion for king. But then enter Euron Greyjoy. Euron Greyjoy gets up, he opens up a chest full of gold and treasures and all that stuff, dumps it on the ground. He has this guy with him blow this, horn that's very loud and obnoxious and ends up killing him as a result of blowing it. And Euron says, I'm going to conquer all the 7 kingdoms and we're going to take over the Iron Throne. We're going to rule from the Iron Islands and I'm going to do this by capturing some dragons. And they're going to rule the land for us. And so everybody says, yep, we want him as king. So Euron becomes king, Victarion goes back to basically pirating, and they try to marry off Asha. She says, fuck this, and she flees. So let's talk about Asha Greyjoy for a minute here. So, yeah, she flees, flees the Iron Islands, goes to Westeros, spends some time in a castle. The castle gets raided. She gets captured by Stannis. And she becomes his prisoner. And I guess now Asha is, she's our eyes so that we can see what goes on through Camp Stannis. I don't know how much of a role she's going to have in the rest of the story. I guess she's going to do something. She's going to help out Stannis. But I don't really see her, living to the end of the story. Or maybe she'll be the only Greyjoy who's left when all the smoke clears. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Theon will. I mean, she does end up with Theon at the end of her story. I mean, she doesn't really recognize him because he's a lot older, or at least a lot older looking. So, yeah, and he's basically in a mess, but I guess that's her only purpose at this point, just so we can see what Stannis is doing. Okay, so now let's talk about Euron Greyjoy. Interesting guy, to say the least, yeah. Seems as though he's like the most stereotypical of the bunch, and by that I mean he seems to look the most like a pirate. I mean, he has the eye patch, and he hangs out in a tavern with a wench on his lap, drinking and, shouting at his men and all that stuff. I keep waiting for him to go arg like that, but he never does. So Euron has been to Valyria, apparently. He's found the civilization come back from a place where apparently nobody has been able to come back to since it blew up or whatever. And, you know, the Lannisters lost their family sword out there, but he just automatically comes back with this big treasure and a horn that can apparently control dragons. Now, obviously it has some sort of magical properties. For one thing, Victarion's Red Priest / Black Priest, Maroc, something like that. I can't remember his name. It's something like that. But anyway, you know, he does, you know, read some inscriptions on it, which would denote that it does have magical abilities. Plus, whoever blows it ends up dead, you know, burned out from the inside. So it definitely has some sort of magical properties to it. What exactly these magical properties are they able to control dragons? Was he in Old Valyria, or was he someplace else? I don't know. But there is one other interesting thing about him. He has blue lips. Now, when we first see Euron, Victarion notes that he doesn't seem to have aged at all. He looks exactly as he saw him last, and that was 3 years ago. I mean, how much could a guy possibly age in 3 years? I don't know. But if he has been all around the world, and he has been in a lot of fights, if he has been to dangerous places, you would think he would show a little bit of wear on him. Now, as I stated before, he does have blue lips. I mean, the whole rest of his face and his eyes, I mean, everything seems perfect. But Victarion describes his lips as sort of blue and bruised. Now, why would he have, you know, blue and bruised lips, but every other part of his face was just still perfect and untouched by time at all? Well, there are one other group of people I can think of that have blue lips. The Warlocks of Qarth. Now, if Euron has been gone for 3 years, he must have been, you know, to quite a few different places, so to think that he'd been to Qarth is not too much of a stretch. Now, was he in league with the Warlocks, or did they see him as a tool, a means to an end? Well, I don't know, but how exactly did he come across this horn that has power over dragons? Now, Euron also knows about Daenerys, and he has a plan to, you know, take over, you know, like I said, take Daenerys' dragons, maybe take her too as a wife. And how does he know all about her? Well, I mean, she does have a reputation, but the Warlocks are especially interested in her because they don't like her very much and they want to take her dragons for themselves. So maybe they think, you know, he'll be able to get her and the dragons for them, and then they'll just be able to, you know, discard him or kill him or whatever. So there is a good possibility that Euron is in league to some extent with the Warlocks. Now, Asha also thinks Euron may be responsible for Balon's death, which is certainly isn't beyond him. I mean, he had no problems knocking up his brother's wife, so killing another brother certainly wouldn't be, you know, too much of a stretch for him. Now, is it possible that he used lightning? I mean, did the Warlocks maybe teach him some magic, that he brought down the lightning himself on Balon? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, Euron at one point, he does say, "I am the storm," so maybe he worships the storm god, and, you know, if the drown god, you know, has the Iron Islanders, and, you know, R'hllor, the red god, it has his own followers, and the others, you know, the opposite of the red god, they have their, you know, little followers. I mean, and, you know, namely, you know, the White Walkers and the Whites. So why couldn't, you know, the Storm God have some followers somewhere who maybe know some storm magic and maybe taught it to Euron? And maybe the Warlocks are a part of, you know, that worship the storm, although it doesn't seem like them, but it could be them. He may have encountered, it may be some other faction we don't know about that worships the storm god that Euron found. But anyway, I mean, it seems as though Euron could benefit a lot from, you know, teaming up with the Warlocks or, you know, an unknown faction that worships the storm god. So I do think Euron is in league with somebody, whether it be the Warlocks of Qarth or some unknown faction that worships the storm god. But either way, I don't think he's going to come out on top in the deal. because I think he may be a little bit too trusting, or maybe just a little bit too arrogant to think that, you know, anybody could possibly touch him, because let's face it, he's got away with a lot in his life, you know. Again, knocked up Victarion's wife, and who knows what else he probably did in his life. Probably some bad things. After all, they do say that he's the maddest of them all. So he probably thinks he's above reproach. And I think the biggest example of him being too arrogant or too trusting is that he actually sends Victarion to go pick up Daenerys and her dragons and bring her back to him. And he gives Victarion this horn in order to do it. So he trusts him with somebody he wants to marry, somebody, some dragons, and a horn to do it. Not. And surprise, surprise, Victarion says, all your gifts are poison. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go over and get Daenerys and her dragons, and I'm going to keep them for myself. Now, maybe Euron is counting on this, and he has a plan up his sleeve to double-cross Victarion. But then again, like I said, Euron, he seems a little bit arrogant to me. But then again, who knows? We will find out eventually. So anyway, now we can talk about Victarion. So Victarion he doesn't become king, and so he travels east, to get Daenerys and her dragons. And and he loses some of his fleet. He gets injured. His shield hand becomes pretty badly injured, gets cut, and cut festers. But luckily, a red priest so happens to wash overboard, and it gets picked up by one of his other ships that arrives late. The red priest named Makoro, he apparently has a black face because he's got the tattoos all over his face, like the red-clad slaves do. But anyway, he says that he sees in the flames that if he doesn't help Victarion, then Victarion will surely die. So Victarion goes, okay. And, he comes out of his cabin with his hand all burnt up, but apparently he's cured and all that stuff. And he just says, yes, I've been cured. And, the maester that couldn't cure him, he throws him overboard, drowns him. Cool. That's the least of his sins before the day is up, though. So Victarion, he's on his way to Marine. He's kicking ass. He's taking names. He's taking ships for himself. He's freeing the slaves and say, okay, you're free now, so now you row for me. And they're just like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. But then Victarion does do a pretty dickish move. He basically brings out a bunch of prostitutes up on deck, and he says, yes, I have a great honor for you. You're going to worship, two gods, the Lord of Light and the Drowned God. And he basically burns the ship with them on it, while they're naked, Now that is a dick move, if I do say so myself. Okay, so let me go back to this idea of Victarion possibly being Azor Ahai. Okay, I see it a little bit more now that I've actually read the chapters. Okay, so he's killed his wife, and he was sort of reborn when he was cured. Maybe his burnt hand is supposed to be his flaming sword. He wields an axe, but maybe his burnt hand is supposed to be his flaming sword. I don't know. And he was a lot different after that curing, wasn't he? He did act a lot differently, so maybe now he's a different guy. He used to just worship the Drowned God. Now he sort of worships the Drowned God and the Red God. Of course, a lot of that has to do with Makoro, and for one thing, Makoro has gained his trust by healing him, something the Maester couldn't do. And he is also kind of whispering in his ear, says, the Drowned God, he's not real, he's not real. Victarion, he's just like, don't you say that. And then he just tries, then Makoro switches tactics. He says, well, the Drowned God is only a thrall to the Red God. He does exist, but he's only, the Red God's slave, or thrall, as you like to call him. He's like, no, don't you talk that way. But don't worry, your Red God will get his due. And then he burns the boat with the naked prostitutes on it. And burning the boat with the prostitutes on it, that was kind of Azor Ahai-ish, Apparently Azor Ahai tempered his flaming sword by sticking it in his wife, and so now he burns these women. So, I guess that's kind of an Azor Ahai thing, but as far as Victarion being Azor Ahai, no, I really don't see it. Maybe he could wake the horn, maybe he could wake dragons with his horn, but I still don't really see that. But another thing is, the story ends with Makoro saying, you must, it doesn't matter if you die, you must use the horn with blood and all that stuff. So, again, it comes back to he has a horn that apparently has some control over dragons, but the whoever uses it will burn up. So I don't know if he's going to trick somebody else into using it, or maybe somebody else will end up with the horn and use it. Well, who do we know that needs to control dragons and yet is impervious to fire? So a lot of people are thinking that Victarion, he's going to destroy the fleet that's attacking Marine, which is a good possibility. I mean, he's been doing pretty good so far with that, but I think Victarion's role in all this is going to be to get the horn to Daenerys. Not intentionally, but I think Daenerys is going to end up with that horn eventually, and she is going to use it to control the dragons. Of course, that's just my little theory. I could be wrong. And so that is my little take on the Greyjoy chapters from Song of Ice and Fire from books 4 and 5. Hope you enjoyed that. So, if you have any other things that you think I left out of this that you want me to go over, just ask me a question about this, what I thought. Leave it in the comments below. I'll try to address all those. And as always, pertinent contact information down below in the abyss. You can use those too. Please comment, rate, subscribe. You know the drill. And until next time, this is I.S. Anderson telling everybody, make your lives grand and have a good day. And smash him in the head with an axe.